Okay, one of the things that we might think a little bit about is in terms of how our society deals with older folks is to think about how we live in such an individualistic type of culture. Collectivist culture is very different than individualistic culture, and in America we certainly, although we have pockets of collectivism, we're very significantly weighted on the individualistic side. Some of you have written about that in some of your responses to things, because maybe you've lived before in cultures that were not quite so individualistic. But one of the things we know is that societies that emphasize independence and self-preservation and taking care of yourself and making your own way, tend to devalue older adults, and societies that emphasize unity and social support and interdependence, all those collectivist ideas, tend to honor and appreciate elders more. So one of the things we might want to think about is what we can do as a community, as a church, as governments, as individual people, as therapists. What can we do about that idea, that notion that we devalue older adults because we are so focused on independence? Now, that's a big philosophical, sociological question, but it's the kind of thing that if we begin to teach our children differently, if we begin to structure our churches differently, if we begin to influence our communities differently, we can maybe change some of that, so that instead of looking at older adults as a group that are a drain on our culture because they're not as productive in a capitalistic kind of sense, we could begin to look at them as a real resource that we should use. And that's something that I think would begin to change us a little bit and change the way that we deal with older adults. There are three main transitions that we would think about when we're thinking about dealing with older folks. There's retirement, we mentioned a while ago. There's also physical decline, which everyone experiences, and it is a major, major thing. Somebody like me that's in their 50s, I already experienced that. I ache and I'm sore in places that I wasn't achy in 10 years ago. It changes significantly over time. And I'm sure that when I'm 74, I'll feel even different. Physical decline is a very real thing. It's something that we have to be honest about, and we have to help people feel like they can be open about. And it's also something that we can be aware of in doing programming and doing therapy and helping families, that that physical decline is there and it's real, so we can modify things to help with that. But it's also true that we're living longer and we're healthier. So we don't need to immediately assume that because someone's old, they're physically kind of decrepit or unable to take care of themselves. And then, of course, there's the question of death and widowhood and how we deal with that. Now, when we talk about marriage for older adults, there are a few things that are true. Some of these kind of may be a little bit counterintuitive. We tend to find that when people think about older adults being married, we're kind of stereotypical there, and we don't really always know exactly what's happening. Marital satisfaction for older adults is generally high if there are some particular things that are happening. Marital satisfaction is low if we're missing some of these important things or if we have a few specific problems. So older adults very often have high marital satisfaction because they have more time for themselves. They have time to travel together, to spend time with each other, to communicate more, and all of those kinds of things. If they do those things, they tend to increase their marital satisfaction. If they don't do those things, or they don't have the opportunity to do those things, then their marital satisfaction is not so high. They also have more time and more freedom to choose rewarding activities, to do things that they like, to do things that they have fun doing, and that helps our relationships sometimes. Good communication, of course, promotes marital satisfaction. Church involvement tends to promote satisfaction in older adulthood in general, and marital satisfaction. Couples that are involved in church together very often tend to say that they're more satisfied with their relationship. Sometimes older adults have more confidence in their conflict resolution skills because they've been doing it for so long. So they're not scared of an argument. They know how to deal with conflicts between the two of them. So sometimes just having that 30 or 40 or 50 years behind you and being able to say, hey, we can deal with that. We know how to deal with that. That's a good thing. Good health is a crucial thing in marital satisfaction. Older adults who are both healthy tend to report much higher marital satisfaction than when one of them has significant health problems. Because as people age, and if one person gets significantly unhealthy, then we very often kind of have too much inequity there. We have one person who's a caregiver and one person who's kind of a patient, and that does not bode well for marital satisfaction. Older adults who are healthy in their marriage very often have a healthy sexual relationship. Now, the form that that sexual relationship takes is really variable. It can be lots of different things. It may not look anything like the sexual relationship that they had 30 years before, but most happily married older adults tend to say they still have some type of sexual relationship that's rewarding. They also tend to have good financial satisfaction. That doesn't mean that they're wealthy. And we all know that money doesn't buy you happiness, but sometimes it helps. And the truth is, as we get older, if we have money to live on, or if we have a way that we can be fairly comfortable as we live, then we tend to be more satisfied with our marriage even. If we have a spouse that is basically psychologically healthy, we tend to have a better relationship, just like is true when we're 30 or 40 years old. If we have good friends together, that helps. Older couples who have older couple friends tend to report higher marital satisfaction. And if there's been a positive retirement experience, if retirement has been something that's been basically rewarding for us instead of boring or depressing, and sometimes that is, sometimes particularly with traditional males, if you spend all your life kind of building your self image and your identity around your job and your productivity, sometimes when you retire, you lose that sense of identity, and that can be really, really difficult. So retirement is kind of a double-edged sword sometimes. It may be really, really happy and healthy, but it can also be really hard for us sometimes. Let's talk for a minute about sexuality, because this is a thing that I think is a little bit misunderstood. And so what I've got here in these next few slides is some myths and some truths, and there are probably some things that you know something about. The myth that older adults don't have sexual feelings. The truth is, most older adults continue to have sexual feelings into their 70s and 80s. Now, some would report that they don't, but most do. Sometimes they're not expressed. Sometimes they're scared to express them. Sometimes they don't have an opportunity because of their health or because of the lack of an available partner. But we know that older folks, even in nursing care situations, very often want to express their sexuality. They just sometimes don't have the opportunity to. It may be a myth also that older adults just don't have any sexual needs. A lot of older adults continue to have sexual needs until they die. Now, these may not be a need for intercourse and orgasm. They may be needs for just physical touch. One of the things we know about older adults is that as you get older, people touch you less. And that may sound kind of weird, but it's kind of true, particularly if you're widowed. If you think about being a widowed person, you might go for days or weeks without another human being touching you. And that's something that most of us need at least some of. And so when we think about one of the things that older adults deal with as part of their sexuality, part of it may be just a need or a desire for closeness and touch, physical comforting, physical intimacy, not necessarily what we would think of as intercourse or orgasm related activities, but maybe some close physical intimacy. Older adults also have sexual ability. Most people continue to have some level of sexual ability throughout their lives. Of course, there are changes because of erectile dysfunctions and all other kinds of aging issues that we won't go into in this class, but um, there still it tends to be some level of sexual ability in older adults. So it's a myth to just decide that because someone's old, they can't do anything sexual anymore. That's not necessarily true. And then finally, the myth that older adults just don't have sex. The truth is, they don't have as much, but they tend to stay active with lots of different forms of sexual expression, like touching, um, even oral sexual experiences, even just physical closeness and touch that gives some physical comfort or some physical arousal without any kind of movement toward orgasm or anything like that. But older adults do tend to do things that are sexual together if they have an opportunity, if they have a partner, and if there isn't some social restriction on them.